Hello and welcome to Gooners in the USA. Mike,
Yes.
another win, another win.
Andrew, do we have we got our Arsenal back? Are they back?
I think they are. I think they're back, and I think they're better than they've ever been.
I mean, this is I'm not one for rushing judgment or hyperbole. I mean, I've never called any of our players the Ballon d'Or winner prematurely, but this is the greatest football team in the history of football. I mean, come at me if you don't think so.
Hey, remember when I told you that we were going to win 7 games in a row, and you laughed at me?
I love how you've tailored that. You said we would win the first 7 games in a row. All right, so let's go forward with the podcast. I'm thrilled for us that we have a returning guest joining us again on the pod, this time on video. Last season we had kind of a quick hit interview in advance of the Östersunds Europa League matchup because that's our mentality. We're like, Swedish, well, we have to get on someone Swedish. We're really very predictable. Ibra wasn't available for that podcast, so we went with Mattias. But he is the Arsenal beat reporter, if they call it that in England. Covers Arsenal for ESPN FC. Mattias, Karen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and thanks for comparing me to Ibra, or at least mentioning me in the same sentence. That's nice of you.
He was actually our second choice, but I check with our second choice first just to make sure that everyone gets offended. So it's been about 8 or 9 months since our last chat, and nothing much in Arsenal world has happened or changed in that time, has it?
No, it's all the same the way it's been the last 22 years. Obviously it's been a lot of changes happening. It's basically a brand new club in many ways. If you look at the last time we spoke, obviously Arsene Wenger was still there, and a lot of people behind the scenes had been the same people there for almost as long as Arsene Wenger had been there. And now it's there's a lot of new faces around, not just Unai Emery, but a lot of other new faces as well.
What's the vibe? I mean, you're slightly, I would say, on more so than we are on the inside of the club. I mean, you follow the club from a press capacity. I'm sure you're at many of the press conferences and behind the scenes a bit. Are you sensing a different vibe, or is that kind of too esoteric of a question or something like that?
Well, there's obviously a lot of optimism around the club with Unai Emery coming in, and given the results they've gotten in the last month or 6 weeks or so, there's a feel-good factor around Arsenal, certainly. It's been a bit weird, there's been some weird things happening as well with Ivan Gazidis suddenly leaving and no one quite sort of figuring out or being willing to say exactly what his motives are for leaving. There's also been the Stan Kroenke total takeover where he bought out Alisher Usmanov to take sort of full control of the club, which obviously a lot of the fans are unhappy about that. And so there's been some mixed emotions among supporters, I think. But obviously, as long as they keep winning, that certainly helps get people on board.
Yeah, that kind of cures all that ails you. And we had just another reminder, because it was kind of slipped in there on a Friday a couple of weeks ago. We had a great chat with your colleague Mattias, with Gab Marcotti about the Gazidis departure, and obviously Gab's the guy to go to when it's anything Milan or Italian football or the business of football. So we had a great chat, and you can find that on our YouTube page and on iTunes if you wish to listen back to it, dear listeners. So we had 2 matches this week, which is kind of per usual at this time of year. The first was a trip that's longer than going from New York to Los Angeles, which is crazy, to Baku to play the Azerbaijani Qarabag. First of all, props to our away supporters who made this trip. That's unbelievable.
I wonder how many of those people actually live there already and are staunch Arsenal supporters.
I was trying to determine that by racially, by looking at the people and being like, are they from Baku or did they come from London?
Europeans are pretty you can. I think we joked about this before, but
you can tell by the cigarette in their mouth.
Well, that, and I think they've got pretty distinct body features too, like facial features. But
well, I know for a fact some people that we've spoken to were there. Some of the people I know on Facebook were there as away supporters, and I mean, I just can't can't give it up to them enough for making Arsenal a daily or weekly part of their life to do that.
Absolutely. So, Mike,
let's get to the game.
Yeah, we took a pretty strong squad. I wasn't surprised by it. I think he's taking it seriously. And again, we're still trying to embed everyone into this system. I think a lot of people were expecting us to send the kids, and he did that and brought most of the first team players.
Yeah, and Mattias, I want to get your view on this, but for me first, when I saw the U23 squad, and I may be missing something, but I saw the U23 squad that played on the Monday, and none of those fringe players that are kind of on the outside of the first team were playing. I mean, Rowe wasn't playing, and we know why. But no Nketiah, no Willock, no OC22, none of those guys were in the squad. And to me, that was kind of a signal that, hey, we're gonna travel with a lighter than normal squad as far as our senior players are concerned, and rightfully so. So I was very surprised to see guys like Nacho and Socrates and Ozil and Lacazette making the trip. But this is a signal. Unai Emery doesn't mess around. He's not going to let the team lull into thinking any game is less important than another one. That any competition should be won just because we're Arsenal. And I kind of love that about it. But whether our top guys break down from playing, a game and a half to 2 games every week remains to be seen. But, I mean, Mattias, is that a statement of intent, bringing those guys to Baku?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's definitely a different approach from last year when Arsene Wenger basically used the Europa League group games to rotate his squad and basically played a completely different 11 in the Europa League compared to the Premier League, and normally had at least 3 or 4 of his academy guys in the squad, if not in the starting lineup. And like you said, he brought Mesut Ozil, he brought Nacho Monreal, who hasn't had a lot of rest, and even brought Ozil on, with 30 minutes left, and they were 2-0 up, which I think last year Ozil wouldn't have been on the plane, and if he had, bringing him on for 30 minutes when they've already won the game,
Ozil wouldn't even have known that we had a game that day.
Exactly. And so you can sort of question, the wisdom of that in hindsight also, because obviously Ozil then missed Sunday's game against Fulham with back spasms, and he's had back problems in the past. And so whether it was really wise to bring him on a 5,000-mile trip on a Thursday night to play a team where, they would have beaten anyway, when you have a Sunday Premier League game with a noon kickoff, you can certainly question whether that was wise or not. But it does send a message that, hey, nobody in this team is above anyone else. It doesn't matter if you're the highest paid player or not. You're going to have to put in the same effort as everybody else, and you're not going to be treated differently. And that certainly does send a message that was different from what it was under Wenger.
Yeah, and I think that is a clear message, and it seems like they had that little snafu at the beginning of the season, and you're in the press box and you're around the team. Do you think there was anything in that, or was that just more media kind of stirring the pot?
I think it wasn't as serious as some reports made it out. I think there was a conversation between Emery and Ozil where they talked about his role in the team and really what his best position is and sort of what Unai Emery expects from him. Whether there was a full-blown sort of row or fallout or bust out or not, who knows? I mean, it depends sort of on who you're listening to, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think there was an issue there because obviously it took Ozil off fairly early in the Chelsea game, early in the second half, and basically stated after the game that the reason for that substitution was that he wanted a more effective pressing game, which basically says that Ozil wasn't really doing his job defensively. And so I think there were a couple of issues there, but they seem to have been sorted out, and I think Ozil has put in a couple of pretty decent performances in the last few games that he's played.
Absolutely, he has. And so, Mike, with us flying all the way to Azerbaijan, we got to witness 3 ducks being broken.
There's nothing I love more than broken ducks.
Guendouzi, Rowe, and Socrates all scoring their first goals for Arsenal.
You don't normally see 3 broken ducks in a season, much less in a game.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I was just quacking all over the place during that game. I mean,
So here's a little statistic for you. Smith Rowe is the first player to score for Arsenal that was born in the 2000s. And obviously that's for the senior team. Mattias, we see players in and out of the squad from the youth team. Something about Smith Rowe seems special. I don't know if it's because he's been taken under the wing of Ozil, but there's just something about him that I think reaps superstar. And I don't want to go out too much on a limb, but I've pretty much classed him in the list of the Messis and Ronaldos. But, covering the team, do you spend much time around the under-23 squad? Do you hear kind of murmurs of those that are getting that kind of buzz around the club?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few of the under-23 games for the last couple of seasons, and I saw Smith Rowe playing last season before he ever made it to the first team, and it was clear even then that this kid is something special. I mean, you saw him playing, even at the age of 17, he was one of the top players in the under-23 team, and also helped their run to the FA Youth Cup final last season, scoring some spectacular goals in the process. And we just had Reece Nelson coming out of the academy as well, and there was a huge buzz about him last year. He was sort of the kid that everybody was talking about, and Smith Rowe sort of came up quietly behind him, and sort of he avoided some of the spotlight because of Reece Nelson, and he was the first guy to break into the first team. But these days, it's very hard to tell which one of those two will turn out to be the bigger talent.
Yeah, and while we play in the Europa League, isn't Reece off in the Champions League?
Yeah, exactly.
That's ironic. He's scoring in the Champions League, or he scored in the Bundesliga. In a youth setup, though, I mean, to me, there's like natural talent and skill that gets you to the fringes of the first team, and all of these people that you've mentioned have it. But then there's making a transition into the first team and belonging there. And that kind of, more so than skill, to me, takes like a next level mentality. It takes a brashness, kind of like an internal confidence to feel like you belong. And I'm comparing Smith Rowe to another player who I saw when he was playing with the youth team, and of course we had a lot of coverage here in the United States, Gideon Zelalem. And what I saw, and it may have changed in the last couple of years, this was before he even went out on loan to Rangers, was a kid who had all the skill in the world, but just didn't look like he felt comfortable in that role of dominator. And his body wasn't that way, his mind really didn't seem that way, and we really haven't heard much about him since he came back, from a long-term injury. So, as much as I'd like to see Smith Rowe get regular playing time in the Premier League or in the high-level championship, which would obviously come through a loan, Mattias, is he too good to go on loan right now? I mean, he needs to be playing with the Ozils and the Lacazettes and the Mkhitaryan's of the world, doesn't he? I hate that expression, but I use it. I mean, he needs to be playing with those guys, not with other teams' guys, right?
Well, I don't know. I think, there are certain benefits of going on loan. I think, sending Reece Nelson out is probably a good idea, and playing in the Bundesliga is probably also, that's a league that probably suits the young up-and-comer guys because it's not as physical, and you can be probably, as an attacking midfielder, you probably don't have as many defensive responsibilities. So I think somebody like Reece Nelson will certainly flourish in Germany and should be able to express his talent there and get some really good first team experience. But obviously there are benefits from staying with the team as well. You train with the first team every day. You get more familiar with the way the manager wants you to play, and Smith Rowe will certainly get more opportunities this season. He will start, every League Cup game as long as they stay in that, and probably a few more of the Europa League group stage games. And who knows, before the end of the season, he might be making the Premier League team as well. So I think for him, staying at the club this year is probably the best decision.
And he's a cheaper option than Aaron Ramsey. I wonder if that has anything to do with it too.
A little bit cheaper.
So another statistic, Mike, that I thought was really interesting was that Socrates is the first player not signed by Arsenal to have scored for the club since 1897.
1897. When I'm like, we share some of our notes with each other, and when I saw that, I'm like, I think that's a typo because 1997 would be realistic. And knowing Andy, I know that's not a typo.
No, I originally put in because I was like, so here's the truth behind it, right? I was like, oh, fuck, I need to go back and figure out, like, because someone put on Twitter the last player who scored for Arsenal that wasn't an Arsene Wenger signing, and I just did not care, so I just put 1897. I think I'll cover all bases.
Well, and then like 10 minutes later, Guendouzi is the second.
Yes.
You could argue that Aubameyang might have been the first not signed by Arsene, but
very true.
But
so I thought Leno looked great again. He was called on a couple times during the match. And it's great to see. And I even put in my notes, I'm only going to mention that as long as he wasn't dog shit against Fulham, which he wasn't. But Mike, we got another 3 points. The group is essentially ours. Any worries or concerns with our back-to-back matches against Sporting? I think in the group, they're probably the likely team that could be a banana skin. They've lost a lot of their key players based off of all the drama that they've had at their club. I assume 4 points from 6 would pretty much suit us. And I know you're getting to go to the away match, but
I kept thinking the away match was match day 4 and that I'd be seeing a dead rubber, but no, it's match 3. It's the next one. So yeah. I mean, we're going to go out there and roll them.
Yeah,
we're not going. I mean, I don't go to away Euro away days and lose. I just don't. Milan, Olympiacos. I mean, it's just about winning. So
you're the reason why we lost to Bayern Munich.
I wasn't at that game. I wasn't there. It wasn't me. It was someone else.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you show up, if you cared and you showed up,
I got you. Yeah, well,
we would be progressing.
Pay me. So yeah, I mean, are we going to start to go into cruise control, or is Unai going for 18 points out of 18, Mattias?
I think as long as the group isn't decided yet, I think he's going to go with the strongest team he can. Obviously, against Lisbon, like you said, they're probably the biggest rival for winning the group, and so I think those 2 games he will take very seriously. If the group is locked up after that, then certainly he'll probably start resting a few more players. But he's definitely taking this competition seriously. Obviously, he won it 3 times with Sevilla, so he knows what he's doing in the Europa League. And I think he sees it as one of the real chances for a trophy this first season. And obviously, he really wants a trophy this season to get off the mark. And so, yeah, as long as the group is up for grabs, he'll keep going strong. And after that, I think he'll take his foot off the gas a bit.
I mean, it couldn't be it can't be that bad when Qarabag comes to visit London. And presumably the group is matched up to start to see some of the guys that I mentioned from the U23 squad on there. I mean, that's unfortunate for the supporters who go to that game. Although again, it's nice to see those kinds. I am thrilled to see a Carabao Cup game on Halloween when I'm over, because I was praying we would win that 3rd round game, because I want to see those guys play. I want to see how the team gets on, and if we lose, we lose. Big deal.
I think a lot of fans feel that way too. And what was interesting about Qarabag is that some of the guys you mentioned from the under-23 team that didn't play were actually on the plane. Like guys like Joe Willock and Eddie Nketiah and also one of the goalkeepers was on the plane and made the trip, even though they weren't part of the match day squad. They were actually part of the team that went out there, and that was sort of Emery's way of showing them also that, hey, you guys may get called upon later on in this competition, and I want you to feel like you're part of the group.
They weren't just designated butlers. Like, you guys will be soaping the backs of these players. Okay, let's move on to Fulham. Andy, your dream came true. Captain Jack. Except it wasn't Captain Jack, it was Captain Jacques.
Yeah.
Xhaka gets the armband like you've been claiming needed to happen for another couple of years. Unai wasn't kidding when he said he'd have 5 captains, was he?
No. And it was a 5 a.m. kickoff for me. And so I decided I was going to sleep in and not touch my phone. I know, surprise, surprise. And I thought the lineup was a bit strange, considering. But Xhaka is he's a leader. We've seen him lead up 2 other teams. It makes sense. And with the whole Ramsey situation, I don't think Ozil right now is fit for it. So yeah, it's a great decision. I like to see him as captain.
Well,
and it shows there's a lot of faith in him as a player, because he's getting a lot of shit from the supporters, and I think this is a way for the management and the staff to say, hey, we've got his back here. I mean, he is a leader on this team. Mike, going into this game, I was just curious. This is a question I've been wanting to ask you for a really long time. What's your favorite nut?
My favorite nut?
Yes.
Do I have to choose? I mean, I'd like both of them. I mean, but if I have to pick, I'll choose the left one. I mean, either that or a walnut. What's yours?
I was kind of referring to nuts that make things, and mine is nutmeg. And it's also Alex Iwobi's because he decided that he was just going to nutmeg 20 different players.
That came off so natural, that bit of comedy there from us. Yeah, the number of times he put the ball through other people's legs in that game and then just continued on his run was staggering. That should be his new move. I mean, like, he should be at 99 on FIFA 19 for that particular move.
Yeah. Well, I got nervous going into this match. I thought when you look at our run of fixtures, this would be the one that would maybe cause us to maybe slip up. And then I got nervous in the first 20 minutes because it seemed like Fulham wanted to come out and play. I mean, it was end to end. They were pushing us. I don't think they were ever in full control, but it just seemed like the first goal could come from either side, and it turned into a slugfest. That first 20 minutes. Yeah,
it reminded me a lot.
It reminded me of what happened after the Conor McGregor fight Saturday night.
Yeah, that was you like to tease me about liking WWE, but it looks like you might be getting into it pretty soon. The game itself, the first half especially, reminded me of the Cardiff game. It was like almost a carbon copy. I mean, Cardiff came out a little bit better than we expected. Fulham came out a little bit better, a little bit more aggressive than their position in the table would warrant. They were punching, we were absorbing. We took the lead, and then just like against Cardiff, we throw the lead away right before the first half comes with a bonehead play right before halftime, starting with an ill-conceived pass. And unlike last time where it was your captain Xhaka, this time, Mattias, it was our boy. It was our Ballon d'Or winner. We know how much you love and support the world-class chops of Nacho Monreal. So how surprised were you to see him make that decision? Because, you could pretty much tie a line between that pass and the goal.
Yeah, I mean, you're never that surprised to see a defensive mistake from Arsenal, but he's probably the least likely culprit usually. He's the guy who's normally the one you can rely on to be a fairly safe pair of hands or safe pair of feet maybe in that back four. But I guess even he makes mistakes sometimes, and you have to give credit to Fulham as well because they certainly made the most out of that chance.
Yeah, they sure did. So again, it's 1-1, right, Andy? Andy's died.
Sorry, I'm muted. 1-1 going into half. Mike, whenever we're in the game at halftime, whether we've got a 1-0 lead or we're tied, I'm excited because I know and I think Unai can outmanage the opposing manager, and he can make adjustments. We've seen it all season. So that being said, we make a few adjustments, and we see that Lacazette gets off the mark early, and we secure that 2-1 lead. And I think from that point on, it was pretty much us rolling.
Here's exclusive footage of the halftime team talk. It was 10 seconds long. That's all you had to do. Unai just stood there and said, "Let me explain something to you all. Get the ball to Lacazette." That's the halftime team talk. That's for Drew, our friend who likes to clap in between every word that he says. I'll touch on this in a bit when we get to the man of the match thing, but spoiler alert, Lacazette's my man of the match. He was just incredible in this game.
Yeah.
And after he scores, I have a little riddle for you. When does 2 + 9 + 8 + 9 + 2 + 8 + 7 + 14 + 8 not equal 67? Anyone want
to? The Aaron Ramsey goal?
Yes. Why? Yes, you're correct. That's the sequence from one end of the pitch to the other of the orgasmic sequence of passes and back heels and players who run the entire length of the pitch. I mean,
it was brilliant.
Top three. Now again, I'm not talking about the glory days, the 1990. Top three of the past 10 years goals, if not the top goal, and we'll talk about that. We've seen from Arsenal, maybe from anyone in the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, the brilliance is just from the build-up. I mean, Ramsey kind of started it, but I think 5 players touched the ball, and each player took a minimum 2 touches, and the ball went end to end. I mean, it was a spectacular movement. There was a sublime finish at the end. I mean, you couldn't have scripted that. And I guarantee you, if you tried to recreate that on the training ground, it would be fucking hard to put the ball in the back of the net.
I mean, Mattias, we got to get your opinion on that goal. I mean, I was rolling around on the floor, and I, like Mesut Ozil, have been suffering from really bad back spasms this week, and I just didn't care. I had to go nuts.
Yeah, it was a sweet goal, obviously, and I think one of the players you shouldn't overlook there is Hector Bellerin and his sort of involvement in that goal. One of the touches he had to get the ball to Ramsey in that build-up was fantastic. And I think Pellerin in general, this obviously against Fulham in particular, but the last few games, I think we've seen a much improved version of Hector Pellerin, and I'm sort of wondering how much of that has to do with Lucas Torreira coming in and giving that back four a bit more protection, because Bellerin's liability. The problem with Pellerin quite often has been he leaves the back four too exposed, and we haven't seen that many instances of that in the last couple of games, which to me has been quite impressive. It's got nothing to do with the goal you were talking about, but I'm going off on a bit of a side rant there. But yeah, that was a sweet goal.
Amazing.
You got to give him credit, because it doesn't happen unless he does that little juke over the player to get it started. And Mike, we talked about that in this system, Pellerin and Nacho play so high up the field. In the first couple matches, they were just left in no man's land because we didn't have that cover. So Mattias is right. I mean, having that ability to have someone who can drop and be there is absolutely spectacular. Aubameyang added 2 goals to round out the match. Great to see him come on as a sub and bang in some goals. It can't be great for him not starting. I know he's probably getting a rest, but again, we see another match where Lacazette and Aubameyang both score when they play. I mean, you couldn't script this any better. Everything is just starting to fire on all cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, is there a better strike pair in the Premier League right now than the two of them? And just as we're starting to maybe play a 4-2-2, I mean 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2, however you want to call it that. I mean, the teams come out and basically said that was the formation for most of Sunday. So they don't really seem to care where they're playing as long as they're playing with each other. They don't really seem to care who gets the start and who comes in off the bench. I mean, I love these guys. It's a love affair. And I just look back 2 or 3 years at some of these starting 11s. And, I mean, we got Bentner and Theo and Chamak out there. I mean, we've come really, really far since those days. And Mattias, I mean, is there anything other than the obvious sign of unity between those two that we're feeling here? I mean, I feel like it's bleeding out to the rest of the team as well.
Yeah, I mean, they do seem to be genuinely good friends on and off the pitch, and I think that's fairly unusual to see when you have 2 top-class strikers like that who are competing for minutes, and they both want to play up front, obviously, and if they're both on the pitch together, they're not going to be able to do that. And Aubameyang has sort of been the one sacrificing himself a little bit, playing out wide with Lacazette in the middle, but. Yeah, they seem to be getting along great, and I think they both, like you said, they want to play together, and even if that means maybe one of them playing out of position, and it'll be quite interesting to see if that formation switch to a 4-4-2 was made with that in mind, because I think Unai Emery is still trying to figure out how to make the most out of that luxury of having 2 top class strikers, which I think if you look around the Premier League, Arsenal might be the only team you can say have 2 top class center forwards in the squad. Obviously, Liverpool have a fantastic front 3, but they have players who are more natural to playing out wide rather than in the middle. And Arsenal have 2 guys who really are world class goal scorers in the box, and you have to figure out how to make the most of that. And it'll be interesting to see if he does play a 4-4-2 with those 2 starting at the same time.
I mean, the best way I can think to put it, on United, you have Lukaku and Sanchez arguing over a penalty. PSG, you had Neymar and who was it? Was it Cavani?
Mm-hmm.
I forget who, arguing over taking a penalty. And on Arsenal, you have Aubameyang giving up his potential hat trick to Lacazette, who hadn't scored in weeks, to give him a penalty. That says everything to me.
It does, Mike. And at the end of the day, I think that Unai Emery is the perfect manager to be able to figure out how to play those two together, because he spent, all that time at PSG having to figure out how you put Neymar, Cavani, Di Maria, and Mbappe in that same team and move those players around and kind of figure out that jigsaw. Let's do a quick man of the match. Mike, you kind of already mentioned yours. I'm going to give an honorable mention to Iwobi. Again, we see him play. We see him play well. As Mattias had kind of mentioned to Pellerin, there's something going on with this coaching, because we're seeing these young players who previously did not look good, looking very good. And so credit where credit's due. Iwobi, when he's come on, has looked great. Another honorable mention for me is the entire back five, from Leno through to the four. The run on that Fulham goal was just perfect. You can't stop every goal from going in, and that run just split all defenders. But for me, Mike, I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here, and I'm going to go with Lucas Torreira as my man of the match, only because I believe he dispossessed in midfield to start 2 of the 5 goals we scored. I think he is our heartbeat. I said it from podcast 1. He would be the most important player for Arsenal if he stays healthy. And
that was 2 years before we signed him.
Yeah, and then as Mattias said, he gives freedom to the defense to make moves and runs. And so for me, he was my man of the match.
Yeah, and like I said, Lacazette for me, and it's not even close. I mean, as good as everyone else was, and your picks, all 7 of them are good picks for man of the match. But I don't recall a number 9 playing a complete performance like that, like he did yesterday. And it's not just his finishing, which was spectacular, but winning the ball in midfield, tracking back, his movement off the ball. I mean, just all of it was amazing. 10 out of 10 in my book. So, Mattias, Andy's taken 7 people. I have the 8th. You've got 3, basically. You've got Mkhitaryan, Welbeck, and Xhaka left to choose from. So, but seriously, who would you pick? I think the team picked Lacazette, but who did you earmark?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, obviously he's the obvious choice with 2 goals, and as Andy mentioned, his work rate throughout that game was phenomenal. I've also been very impressed with Iwobi in the last few games. I think we're finally sort of seeing signs of him developing into the player that we all thought he would be when he first sort of burst onto the scene. When he broke into the first team 2 years ago, he looked like a talent who could really be something special as well. And then last season under Wenger, he sort of stagnated and wasn't a regular starter. And when he played, he seemed to lack that confidence he needed to really take his game to the next level. When you look at him, he's got the potential to sort of have a pretty unique mixture of, I think, size, strength, speed, technique, and vision. He's sort of a number 10 playmaker, but who has the body of really being able to boss people around and take people on in tackles and challenges and things like that, where normally a creative attacking midfielder is much smaller if you look at the likes of David Silva and those guys. And I think finally, like you mentioned his nutmegs, where he's showing off some great sort of good work and
confidence.
And it's definitely confidence. And now he's getting involved more in creating and scoring goals as well, which is sort of the last piece of the puzzle for him, I think, is to become a regular goal scorer. He's setting goals up now regularly, but I think he needs to start scoring a bit more as well. But I think that's certainly one of the most promising aspects of this Unai Emery regime. When he was brought in, he was hailed as a coach who can really do a lot of one-on-one coaching and man management and improve players. And I think with Iwobi, we're seeing signs of that, and that's certainly a cause for optimism.
Absolutely.
I love when we have a guest on from England and we do the podcast at the time of day that we normally do. We normally end up seeing the sun go down on our guests.
I'm just thinking whether I should actually turn my lights on here a little bit. I'm getting a bit dark, aren't I?
One time we had somebody who, for one reason or another, he had to do the podcast from his car, and he descended into darkness, like from the beginning of the pod to the end of the pod. It was funny.
Let me go turn the light on here so you can actually see my pretty face. Hold on.
All right, Andy. we're gonna talk some general.
We gotta fill some time here, Mike. So we're gonna see each other in a couple days.
That's true. We are. I cannot wait. Reunited. It's gonna feel so good, Mattias. We were just vamping. What is it called? Vamping. Vamping a little bit about how I'm traveling to Denver on Wednesday and gonna see Andy. Andy and I met.
Wait,
once.
I thought you were coming in on Thursday.
Well, I'm coming in Wednesday, but I have business to take care of until Thursday.
Okay.
But we met once, and it was before the podcast. I gave him everything he needed to know that I was the right person to pick for this, and then we haven't seen each other since in person. So Thursday, it's going to be
It's going to be glorious. So we got 9 wins on the trot. I don't want to do this every week, Mike, but I want to point out that right now we're only 2 points off of first place. This time last season, we were in 6th place, but we were already 9 points off of first. And although at this point, if you look at how we played last season, we were kind of drawing and winning. There's just I feel like there's something different about this team and the way that we are presenting ourselves in each match. And granted, if you look at those 9 wins, there hasn't been any, other top 4, top 5 teams. But you look at some of those teams and who they've beaten. I mean, there's been no rollovers, right? It's the Premier League. You're not guaranteed 3 points every week. I certainly didn't think we were going to put 5 in past Fulham. But there's just something different happening at the club, and God knows where we'll be at Christmas. But it's great that we're not 9 points off of first, so we're only 2, and there's everything to play for.
Yeah, I mean, the point where the club, to me, started clicking, like your microphone is clicking, and turned everything around. It's gone under the radar, but Mattias, you wrote about it. I think this whole thing turned around when Emery started banning fruit juice from the training ground. I mean, that's. I know that the ban probably happened earlier, but you wrote about that right about the end of August, and that right after the Chelsea game. And you know what? We haven't lost since.
Well, that was the secret sauce, so to speak, or the secret juice, maybe.
I mean, those guys were just dousing themselves in fruit juice over the last 5 or 6 years, and now it's all over. So
I was going to say when it was Danny Welbeck returning from England duty, or as I like to call him, Welly.
Welly.
So Emery was interviewed post-match, and they brought up the top 4, and he just said he's remaining calm about it, and this is finishing in the top 4, and he's not counting his chickens, so to speak. So, Mike, is this a good mentality for our manager to have at this time of the season, saying to the press, saying to his team, we're not worrying about where we are in May, we're worrying about today and tomorrow? I mean,
oh, hell yes. I mean, he is the last one who should be acting like we've accomplished anything or that we are on a better track than people saw for us at the beginning of the season. I mean, in stark comparison, I remember when Brendan Rodgers came to Liverpool and had a little bit of success early on. He had this whole kind of like, I'm a scientist, look at what I'm doing kind of approach. He did that awful Being Liverpool documentary. The documentary wasn't bad, but he was cringeworthy throughout that entire thing. Mattias, did they show that in overseas? I mean, it was a NBC Sports production, but I thought maybe it came on over there.
I don't think so. If it was on here, I missed it, I think.
Oh, I mean, in all that extra free time that I'm sure you have, right? See if you can find it online, because it's just, especially now knowing how it ended for him at Liverpool, so cringeworthy. And when you act like that, and then quite literally you or your team falls on their face, you lose all credibility. So Unai is doing exactly what Unai should be doing, which is just leading the team, tinkering the way he needs to tinker, and getting this team ready for a long run of success. We're the ones, Andy, that need to be ridiculously overconfident and start talking about the championship. We're the ones who should be talking about how the top 4 is in the bag and that we're going to be the first team to be promoted from the Europa League during the competition and then win the Champions League in May. I mean, Mattias, that's our job, not his, right?
Well, I think you guys have enough confidence for the whole fan base. Yeah, probably. But no, I think you're absolutely right. He's striking the right tone after games, talking about staying calm, which is certainly the right thing to do. And if you look at this 9-game winning streak, like you said, not only they haven't really beaten any of the top teams, but there's been 3 or 4 of those games that easily could have gone either way. You look at the West Ham game, the Everton game, the Watford game. Arsenal were on the ropes a bit in those games, but then found a way to improve things in the second half. And maybe that's one of the main reasons, really, to feel optimistic, is that this season they're finding ways to win games where they're not really playing that well. Whereas if you compare that to last season, they were finding ways to lose games that they totally dominated.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a different mentality there, where the players are remaining calm on the pitch, even in close games. Whereas last season, if things weren't going their way, or as soon as they conceded an equalizer, it seemed like the confidence sort of disappeared, and the crowd got really sort of edgy and nervous right away, and that seemed to rub off on the players. And now there seems to be a bit more calm, across the entire squad, and I think maybe that's one of the key things that Emery has brought in so far.
And our fan base is fickle, so let's see what happens when we go on a slide of maybe 1 or 2 losses in a row. Mattias, I want to go to yeah, I want to go to you. I want to go to you on this one. Arsenal just announced the £300 million deal with Adidas, which will last 5 years. That's £60 million a year. It's the 3rd most lucrative deal in sponsorship, behind Barcelona, who are paid like 170 million, and United, who I think is at like 90. Puma has opted to sponsor City next season at just 50 million a year. So there's a lot of excitement surrounding this announcement. Do you buy into all this? I mean, do you think that the money is going to be reinvested into the club? Should we care as much as we do about this announcement? Because the fans online have just been over the moon.
Yeah, I think the fan excitement is because of 2 reasons. Not only the money, but I think a lot of fans were unhappy with the Puma designs this year, and are more excited about seeing Adidas coming in and maybe creating some nicer kits for next season. But the money certainly matters. If you look at, if the figures are correct, then they're going from getting £30 million a year to £60 million. That's money that can be directly reinvested in the transfer market or on the wage bill. And in conjunction to that, you also have a new sponsorship deal that goes into effect next season with the Emirates for the shirt name sponsorship. That should also boost Arsenal's coffers by around an extra £20 million a year.
We were going to make a bid for that. It's over.
It's over. Oh. Yeah. That's you're too late. You're too late and $1 short.
We were way shorter than $1.
So if you look at it and you also got the sleeve sponsor this season with Visit Rwanda, which say what you will about that, but it's still from a purely financial perspective, it's an extra £10 million a year for Arsenal. So in combined, that you're looking at an extra 50 or 60 million pounds a year that they're going to have to maneuver with, either in the transfer market or when it comes to paying players bigger salaries. And so it will certainly have a big effect on their spending power, and it sort of lessens the pressure on them getting back into the Champions League as well, because it will help offset that loss of income if they don't make it in there. So it's a good deal for Arsenal. It's a big step forward, but you could also say that for the last few years they haven't really made the most maybe of the financial opportunities that were out there. So you could also say that they're really just getting up to speed with some of their big rivals, like you mentioned, like United and Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean it's they're all moves in the right direction, and we're doing it with. I mean, I don't know how much he might have had to do with it, but doing it without Ivan Gazidis. So there you go.
I think these deals were basically in place with before Gazidis left. He was part of bringing these these deals in. Maybe now he won't get the credit for the Adidas deal, but I think that was pretty much locked up before he decided.
No, that doesn't take place in like 5 minutes. But I was just kind of kicking him out the door as he left. Got some user questions. Spent about 10 minutes doing this. And the first one is from Fredo in New Orleans. What does Lacazette need to do to get in the France squad? Are you a guy, Mattias, that like really, really wants your players to play internationally during friendlies? Or do you prefer that they just somehow go under the radar and stay like in a hermetically sealed container for 14 days?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the international break coming up, I don't think there's a massive loss for players not to be in the squad. I think it's almost a benefit for Arsenal to have a lot of their players not be called up for these. They're not friendlies anymore. They're the UEFA Nations League games, but they're essentially glorified friendlies. In terms of what he has to do to get into the squad, I mean, he's basically a victim of France's ridiculous depth of talent. I mean, he's got Mbappe and Giroud and who else? Benzema isn't even playing for the national team anymore. But you look at the forwards they have available to them, and it's not easy to get in that squad. But obviously, if he keeps scoring the way he has been, then they're going to have to start considering him.
Yeah, I mean, based on form this season, you really can't exclude him, can you? We've talked about the goal this weekend, but we haven't spent a lot of time talking about the scorer of the goal, and it's obviously a relevant topic right now. So we got 3 different questions from 3 different people on this, and we'll ask them all together to try to consolidate. First is from Tom Rosenhammer, a.k.a. Tom Sevens. If Rambo bangs in 10 goals by January, does he get a new contract offer? That's the first question. Second, from Mike Hernandez, if Ramsey's sold in January, what's the best way to reinvest the proceeds? Winger, center, he says CM. I got to think he means a center half at this point, or a center defender, or save and wait until summer. And then the third question from Schwinn, it's not really a question. It's, oi, Mike, you still want to throw Ramsey into the reserves? And I knew that one was coming. To give you some background, the last couple of weeks, I've reached my breaking point on the whole Ramsey thing. It's just when it becomes clear a player's leaving and isn't going to be staying, I'm not a huge fan of him being played in the lineup, especially, Alexis Sanchez, especially when we're kind of building for the future and building this core of players who play together every week or every other week and are building for the future. So I kind of advocated for, once the whole thing fell apart with Ramsey, I don't care whose fault it was. I don't care who pulled the contract. And, clearly things broke down, and I kind of tend to blame his agent on that a little bit. But I said, throw him in the reserves. Don't let him play. At most, maybe bring him on as a impact sub at the end of games. But I didn't like him getting kind of the special treatment there. So, and then he goes and does that on Sunday. And frankly, I think he also had a bit to do with one of the other goals that we scored after he came on. So he's a class player, and he's not throwing strops everywhere and being obnoxious. But I mean, Mattias, what do you do with Ramsey? And then, as to the other questions, if he's banging in goals, do you give him and suggest your contract offer? And if not, and you sell him, what do you do for him?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's hard to sort of really figure out what's happening in that case. The reasons, for Arsenal pulling the contract offer that was on the table, that happened sort of around the same time. Obviously, the Gazidis left also. So who knows whether, the people who took over, like Raul Senlehi, perhaps made a decision that, Ramsey isn't worth the money. Who knows? Or maybe it's all part of a big negotiation tactic to make sure he doesn't try to get a Mesut Özil type deal. Who knows? Maybe these talks can be resurrected at some point. But obviously, if he does keep scoring, then that will certainly increase the pressure on the club offering him a new deal, or at least starting the talks all over again. Maybe I think Ramsey is a player who's a bit infuriating at times because he keeps scoring these highlight reel goals like he did on Sunday. And then he has stretches of games where he just struggles to make an impact, on the game over 90 minutes, and then he pops up with a moment of brilliance every now and then.
I mean, the consistency isn't necessarily there, even though the brilliance every once in a while is. I mean,
yeah, exactly. And we're all still waiting for him to rediscover that form of 2013-14, where he looked like an absolute world beater, and there was talk about Barcelona buying him for £50 million, and you thought, yeah, that doesn't sound unreasonable. And you think now that any team would come in for him at that price sounds ridiculous, but. If there's a deal to be made in January, I think Arsenal will certainly consider it. Obviously, it would be better for them to get 15-20 million for him than to lose him for nothing next summer. But the problem is that from the player's point of view, he's much better off leaving as a free agent and then getting that 15-20 million, whatever that transfer fee would have been, that can then be turned into part of his salary instead if the club gets him for free. So. Financially, for his point of view, it's he's probably intent on writing his contract out and leaving for free next summer, unless Arsenal do offer him a new deal.
Yeah, I can't imagine at this point with it breaking down Arsenal and them being able to come to an agreement. But stranger things have happened. So we've got a couple more questions, which we are actually going to move to next week. We're going to be doing our normal interlull pod is going to be a live in-house version, Andy, from your house, as a matter of fact. So we'll move those extra questions. Thank you to Joe Zalak, to Kerry McCollum, and to everyone else that asked a question. But we're on a pretty tight hour-long time frame today, and we want to keep it to that. So thanks again for those questions. Andy, did you want to add anything on Aaron Ramsey? I know we talked about it regularly, but
if we were going to sell him and we got money, I'd like to see a center back come in. I've been impressed with Rob Holding. I know Koscielny's coming back, but the more games you play, the more intense they're going to get, the more injuries we're going to get. And we haven't seen injuries hit the squad, knock on wood, very much. So that's where I would put the money. But let's just see what happens. It'll be interesting couple months.
Yeah, and for me, I if we sell him in January, and I would, I'd take that money and basically just make it a bigger summer. See if we can take that money, add some top four money to it, and get ourselves a world beater for next year. So some final thoughts. Mattias, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate having you back on again. And anything that you're currently working on, how do we find you and maximize the Mattias Karen experience for our listeners? We're doing a ride at the Brighton Boardwalk, by the way, called the Mattias Karen Experience.
That sounds good. I'll be there for the grand opening. Yeah, no, you can always find me on Twitter just at Mattias Karen, or just check the ESPN.com website for my stories on Arsenal.
Excellent, and it's good stuff. And Andy, like I said, I'll be seeing you on Thursday.
Yes, sir. The Swede embrace.
We're going to be doing I'm going to meet my son Ollie. Who we all know is mine, even though I haven't been to Denver in 25 years. We're going to do an in-person video interlull with the two of us, Joey Murphy and Justin, the Spaniard-hating Mexican Trujillo, on Friday evening. If it doesn't happen, then you'll know exactly what happened to the four of us. But anyway, I appreciate you opening your home to me, and you're going to regret it. But it's the thought that counts. So until Friday, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening to us on iTunes or Stitcher, give us a rating and a thumbs up to let us know what you think of the pod. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up?
No, thanks a lot, Mattias, for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, let's hope that our weeks are as good as this one was, and it could be a very, very interesting year. I'm optimistic. Next time I'll see you talking about a game, I will be over there, and I cannot wait. So anyway, that's it for us. Come on, you Gooners.